Branagh's Henry V, like Olivier's Henry V, brings Shakespeare back to the movies after a period of time when Shakespeare had not been successful at the cinema at all. So for Olivier, he's making really the first genuine successful Shakespeare film. For Branagh, he's jump-starting a kind of new period of Shakespeare on film after a long drought. In the late 70s through the 80s, you didn't see Shakespeare at the movies just about ever. If you saw Shakespeare at all, you saw him on TV with a BBC production. The 70s and 80s, the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, decided to televise every single one of Shakespeare's plays over several years, and they eventually came here on PBS. But that was what you got, and the production values weren't always very strong. But actually going to the movie theater to see Shakespeare was kind of dead in the water by the 80s. So in 1989, Branagh has this big gamble where he takes a chance and tries to bring Henry V to jumpstart it with Henry V, the same movie that Olivier had used to jumpstart an earlier era of cinema. After Olivier has Henry V, he has his own. He can make his Hamlet and then his Richard III. Orson Welles does a bunch of Shakespeare movies, or a bunch of other Shakespeare movies in the 40s and 50s, including Third of Blood, thanks to Olivier. And thanks to Branagh, you get all your kind of 90s and early 2000s Shakespeare films. You get Julia Stiles in various movies. The 2000 Almereyda Hamlet would be, low budget as it is, would be unthinkable without Branagh's Henry V paving the way. I saw this Henry V when it first came out in the movie theaters. Yeah, I'm old and creaky, as you know. To do that, I had to get on public transportation in Boston and ride a train all the way downtown. And I lived in a college neighborhood, but it wasn't playing in my college neighborhood. It was only playing in one theater in all of Boston, a city which, as you may have heard, has a few colleges and universities in it. I had to switch trains. I had to take a very long, slow train out to the outskirts of wherever to the one theater that was playing it, because Shakespeare films didn't make any money. You only booked it in one theater in an entire major metropolitan area. 4 years later, I didn't have to take the train anywhere to see Much Ado About Nothing. Henry V's success had caught on, and so Much Ado About Nothing I saw in a totally packed theater in the cinema nearest me in Boston. People laughing, people having a great time. Not possible until Henry V paves the way. So but weirdly, Branagh starts this back by going head on at Olivier. He's in a role in a film where he'll be obviously compared to Olivier, both as a director and as an actor, playing the same part, doing the same movie, and not an easy play to put on film either. So he has all of the problems Olivier had, and a few others. He has Olivier's problems with Henry V. He has the problem that it's a series. He has the problem of trying to convince people that Shakespeare is viable in the movie theater. And the problem with the series is also the Falstaff problem. What do you do about this major character who's so very important to this movie, but doesn't appear in this particular set part of the series? And he has the chorus problem. We have this meta-theatrical chorus. It talks a lot about theater and what theater can and can't do, where it's like we're in a totally different art form. We're doing a movie, you can do anything you want. So Branagh inherits all those three problems, has to deal with them in different ways than Olivier does, and he has the fourth problem, the problem of Olivier, how to deal with Olivier and how to be different. You can see the Falstaff solution for Branagh. It means cutting in bits of the Henry IV plays. We see flashbacks of the king as prince hanging out with Falstaff, and that's from the Henry IV Part 1 and a bit of Henry IV Part 2. We deal with the chorus. We keep the chorus, which is totally unnecessary in a way, but is expected. It's become part of the play. So we're going to find a way to translate that very, very theatrical thing into cinematic terms. You see, they got the great Shakespearean actor Derek Jacobi to come and be the chorus in modern dress, and we start famously in a studio rather than theater. So we have to take for granted, okay, we're talking about plays, but really we mean movies. And then there's the problem of making this go, and with it the problem of competing with Olivier, 45 years after the fact. Olivier's solutions to the special problems of this film are actually very experimental, very subtle. Branagh's are less experimental. Branagh's not a very experimental filmmaker, or at least not in this first phase of his career. He can be very middle of the road. He can be very square. He does do some elaborate, fancy film school long cuts that are heavily choreographed. We'll talk about one later. There's one thread on our discussion about one of those. But lots of times, he is right down the middle. When he does the normal thing, normally in a movie when we're trying to get emotionally closer to the character, we zoom in closer, the camera moves in. You'll notice that Olivier, for the really big speeches with Henry as a public man and a big historical figure, as the speech gets bigger, Olivier's camera actually zooms back, pans out, so you get to see more and more of the crowd, and you get more of the effect of the king talking to everybody. Branagh knows he's going to zoom in close up on the king. Branagh loves him some tight close-ups, so you may have noticed that while looking at Much Ado About Nothing. He's going to do, instead of doing the kind of Olivier trick where the voiceover soliloquy, the single soliloquy Henry has, Branagh just says, he just prays out loud to God, has his argument with God. What's that argument with God about? It's about the problems of the earlier part of the series, that Henry kind of shouldn't be king, because his father stole the crown, and he's afraid that one of these days, not so far in the future, God is going to punish him for having a stolen crown, and he's really hoping it's not today when he has all these guys with him. Branagh has a broad popular, his language, he is a classically trained actor, absolutely, in some of the various schools that Olivier went in, the same system Olivier came out of, but in a much later generation of that system. Now, some of you tend to talk about, in your papers, you tend to talk about theatricality as a bad thing, and you tend to use theatricality to mean generally old schoolness. In a lot of ways, Branagh's film is, well, very cinematic, is closer to being theatrical than Olivier's. What? Doesn't Olivier start with a theater in a theater? Yes, but that theater within a theater thing, that inside the globe thing, you would never do that on stage. That's a movie about a play. That's not just, let's turn a camera on a play. Branagh actually warmed up for this movie. This movie is a film production based on a stage production that he did with the Royal Shakespeare Company a couple of years earlier. And he's got a lot of the same cast. One thing you'll notice, one way you know that Branagh hasn't had, that Shakespeare in the movies isn't back because Branagh hasn't brought it back yet. This is when he brings it back. This is the Branagh movie with no American stars. You see no Hollywood people here. Christian Bale is not a Hollywood star yet. Yeah, he's here. Yeah, every Branagh movie we see, someone's played Batman. But this Christian Bale is a long way from playing Batman or going to Hollywood. He's still a child star. This was done by the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-on-Avon, transferred to London. And we've kept Brian Blessed. We've kept a lot of the stars. Emma Thompson is here as the princess. And so actually a lot of things that are happening, and one is a real difference, and it's not a difference of theatrical versus not theatrical. It's a difference in different generations of how actors are trained and how direction works. Olivier's generation of classical Shakespearean actors are very star-centric. Productions are very star-centric. You have a lead and a bunch of supporting players, and the supporting player's job is to get out of the way, to feed the lead actor the ball. So Olivier gets much, much more attention in his Hamlet too, and in his Henry V than anybody else gets. And that's how it would be if you went to the theater in 1946. It's the big star, and then a bunch of people hanging out. By the 80s, especially actually in mainstream traditional British theater, the switch had been moved to a more repertory system, which is actually a little bit more like Shakespeare did, where you would actually play a bunch of the same group of actors play for a season. a bunch of plays in repertory switching off lead roles, this actually leads to a wider distribution of attention. The lead is still the lead. Henry is still the biggest part by far, but you'll see in Branagh's Henry V, the minor characters get more time, they have more time, there's more attention from the camera, they get more, their meatier performances. And that's not an accident, it's not just Branagh. That's how Branagh was trained. That's how the Royal Shakespeare Company operates. That's how the Great Lakes Theatre Company in Cleveland operates. That's how the game plays. This is an ensemble piece where people trade off. That's another reason you will see in Branagh's film, both this and in Much Ado, you see bit characters be reused. They're on stage a lot, like you would do actually on stage today. Minor characters tend to be, you find other things for those minor characters to do. In Much Ado But Nothing, you see the kind of watchmen, the low-ranking watchmen, are in the shot lots of times. They're just generally around the villa doing stuff. They're in they're in Balthazar's song, singing harmony, you know, that kind of thing. Here, Branagh has a much smaller budget actually than Olivier has, and that's a much smaller army, but you notice that most of the soldiers you see are people who are featured in who have speaking roles. So it's actually a group, and we've gotten a kind of more personal connection in that we've had stage time for dialogue from most of his actors. This is very theatrical, just like Olivier's theatrical. It's just theater from different generations. Now, one more thing. People will talk about the Olivier movie as glorifying war. Not so much glorifying war as trying to cheer people on in the midst of a war. And Branagh as being the down and dirty, telling the truth about war. There's mud everywhere. Now, more realistic. Maybe. Let me play devil's advocate here for a minute. It is certainly true that Olivier's movie functions on some level as military propaganda. If you feel military propaganda is bad, remember it's military propaganda to fight the Nazis. If you can forgive anybody for being propagandistic, let me say one word to you: Nazis. I'm not convinced that Branagh is down and dirty. Now, there's much more mud and muck in that battle. He's actually borrowed a lot of that. Branagh's borrowed a lot of that from Chimes at Midnight, our bonus movie, where Orson Welles stages a very ugly, much uglier than this, very brutal battle scene. Branagh actually sets the St. Crispin's Day in the fall, which is calendrically accurate. Yeah, it's in October. So yeah, the leaves should be changing. It shouldn't be a beautiful spring day on St. Crispin's Day because it's the fall. And there's mud everywhere, and there's dirt, and there's blood on the king's face. Nobody's clean here. And initially, some of the critical reactions, oh, this is the post-Falkland Islands, post-Vietnam, anti-war Henry V. This is an anti-war movie. I don't know. I think we're really rooting for Henry here. This is actually a very strategic. This is not war propaganda or not propaganda for kingship or military adventure. This is a smarter version of the same cheerleading for Henry. Henry is still our guy. We still love Henry. Henry, who's fighting a war for no good reason. I'm saying this not because you should focus on the plot or deal with the reality inside the film, but here's the truth. There's a much harder way to go at Henry than either of our filmmakers do. And maybe it'd be very hard to make a successful movie where Henry's just a monster and a bastard and a land grabber. But in fact, there are hints in the text that he's a monster and a bastard and a land grabber. He's someone who takes his wife. He's like, as military conquest, I love France so well, I will not part with a village of it. Oh, you romantic fool. But Branagh, like Olivier, plays that as romance. Oh, she's got to marry him to the country. Both filmmakers keep that long speech by the Archbishop about the Salic Law, the long thing in Act 1, Scene 2, about who can inherit in France, that seems to make no sense. It's long and boring and you can't follow it. And then at the end it says, well, it's as clear as the summer sun, and everybody on stage laughs because it's a joke. It's not clear. You know why you can't follow that? Because it's BS. It doesn't make sense. But that's a speech, a long, complicated speech, and the end run is, oh yeah, you're the King of England is actually King of France. What? When was the King of England King of France? That makes no sense. It's just BS. It's just an excuse. Why is Henry going to conquer France? Does he have a good reason? Are the French genuinely bad guys in this movie? No. He's doing it because kings do what they want to do. He's having a military adventure. And if you're joining like most of you, you're joining our series in in movie or play number 4, at the end of episode 3, his dying fathers told him, "Start a foreign war, distract them." There've been 15 acts of civil war with Englishmen fighting Englishmen. The old Henry IV's advice is, fight somebody else for a while, take him overseas, and that's kind of what Henry's doing. You could present him as a really bad guy. He's not. What Branagh does is make gestures at wars being bad, wars being tough, but in the end, we're still on the side of the guys. We're happy they win. It's still about the heroism of the king and his soldiers who didn't necessarily have to come here at all. Here's a big difference. Branagh, unlike Olivier, keeps the speech in front of Harfleur, in which Henry threatens serious military atrocities. He threatens crazy war crimes. Rape, murder, infanticide. Your screaming infants spit it on pikes. He's threatening to, like, spit open babies with spears like they're a kebab. Dashing out old people's brains. That's crazy violence. Now, Olivier just cut that. Branagh keeps it. But then, after the French surrender, you have a close-up shot of Branagh's Henry sighing in relief. Oh, God, I didn't have to do it. As if he were bluffing or as if he really didn't want to do it. So Branagh looks for lots of ways to make gestures that, oh, we're not airbrushing out the dirty parts, because an audience in 1989 would not be naive enough to accept that version of a pro-war movie. He's making a pro-war movie for a more sophisticated audience. And it ends with his kind of film set piece. We have that long walk through the battlefield, the 3-minute tracking shot where Henry carries the dead boy through the battlefield. He actually walks out of the shot and then back in, but the camera never cuts away, never stops moving. We see almost everybody in the French. We see a terrific battlefield, and that is as Branagh's way of kind of testifying to how horrible war is. But in the Olivier, what he hasn't done is what Olivier does, which is in the very last scene, the Duke of Burgundy talks about how awful war is, where Olivier has a long montage about how brutal war is and showing the ruin. These movies are not so different. And the other thing that Branagh has to do, Branagh has to compete with Olivier at every turn, but he also wants to steal from Olivier. Look for the ways he steals from Olivier. That's it. I've had fun. I hope you've enjoyed the course. I'm reading papers now. I'm looking forward to reading more papers soon. Thanks.